The afternoon sun was shining bright through the windows of Rose's Diner, a small restaurant on the highway where people stopped for coffee and burgers. It was a Thursday afternoon around 3 o'clock, and the place was half full with regular customers. Some were truck drivers taking a break from their long journeys. Others were elderly couples who came there every week for their favorite pie. The smell of fresh coffee and fried food filled the air, and the sound of plates clinking and quiet conversations created a peaceful atmosphere. In the corner, booth near the window, sat a 17-year-old girl named Lily Chen. She had been coming to this diner every Thursday for the past 2 years. Right after her physical therapy sessions at the medical center down the road, Lily had cerebral palsy, a condition that affected her muscle control and movement. Her hands trembled when she tried to hold things, and she needed a motorized wheelchair to get around. But none of that stopped her from being independent and doing the things she loved. Today, like every Thursday, she ordered her favorite strawberry milkshake and a basket of crispy French fries. The owner of the diner, an old man named Frank who had run the place for 30 years, always made sure her order was perfect. The waitresses knew her by name and always greeted her with genuine smiles. This diner had become her safe place, somewhere she felt normal and accepted. Lily carefully brought the milkshake to her lips, using both hands to steady the glass. It took her a bit longer than others to do simple things, but she had learned to be patient with herself. She was scrolling through her phone with one hand, looking at photos her friends had posted from school. Even though she was homeschooled due to her medical appointments and therapy schedule, she still kept in touch with a few kind classmates who treated her like everyone else. The bell above the diner door chimed, and 3 teenage boys walked in. They looked about 18 or 19 years old, wearing expensive sneakers and designer hoodies. Their names were Ryan, Cole, and Mike. Everyone in town knew these boys, and not for good reasons. They had been suspended from the local high school twice in the past year for fighting and causing trouble. They were the kind of boys who thought being cruel made them look tough and cool. Ryan was the leader of the group, tall with slicked back hair and a mean look in his eyes. Cole was shorter but stockier, always looking for someone to impress. Mike was the follower, the one who laughed the loudest at jokes that weren't even funny just to fit in. They slid into a booth right behind Lily, talking loudly and making sure everyone in the diner noticed them. At first, everything seemed normal. They ordered burgers and sodas from one of the waitresses, but then Ryan noticed Lily in the booth in front of them. He watched her struggling slightly to dip her fries in ketchup, her hands shaking from her condition. Instead of feeling compassion or simply minding his own business, something dark flickered in his eyes. He elbowed Cole and nodded toward Lily, a nasty grin spreading across his face. Cole looked over and immediately understood what Ryan was thinking. Mike, who was always desperate for approval, joined in without even knowing what was happening. The 3 boys started whispering to each other, but their whispers were loud enough for Lily to hear. They were making fun of the way her hands moved, imitating her trembling motions and laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. Lily felt her stomach drop. She had experienced bullying before, but usually it happened at the mall or in public places where she didn't know anyone. Here, in her safe place, she never expected this kind of cruelty. She tried to focus on her phone and ignore them, hoping they would get bored and stop. Her heart was beating faster and she could feel her face getting hot with embarrassment. But the boys didn't stop. They got louder and bolder. Ryan started making exaggerated movements with his hands, mocking the way Lily ate her fries. Cole joined in, pretending to shake uncontrollably and making stupid faces. Mike pulled out his phone and started recording, thinking this would be great content to show their friends later. The other customers in the diner noticed what was happening. An elderly woman sitting 2 booths away looked uncomfortable and whispered something to her husband. A truck driver glanced over, frowned, but then looked back down at his newspaper. A young couple in the corner exchanged worried looks but did nothing. Everyone seemed frozen, unsure of what to do or too afraid to get involved. Lily felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She didn't want to give these boys the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She took a deep breath and tried to focus on finishing her milkshake, but her hands were shaking even more now, partly from her condition and partly from the anxiety these boys were causing her. Then Ryan did something that crossed every line. He stood up from his booth, walked over to Lily's table, and stood right in front of her. He looked down at her with a mocking smile and said in a loud voice so everyone could hear, "Hey, why are you shaking so much? Are you scared of something, or do you always look like that?" Cole and Mike burst out laughing from their booth, encouraging Ryan to continue. Lily looked up at him, her eyes showing both fear and quiet strength. She managed to say in her slightly slurred speech, which was also affected by her condition, "Please leave me alone. I'm not bothering anyone." Her voice was soft but clear. She had every right to be there, to enjoy her meal in peace just like anyone else. But Ryan didn't care about rights or basic human decency. Instead of walking away, he raised his hand and slapped Lily across the cheek. It wasn't a punch, but it was hard enough to make a sound that echoed through the now silent diner. Her glasses flew off her face and clattered onto the table. Before anyone could react, Cole jumped up and gave her another slap on the other side of her face, like this was some kind of game to them. Mike kept filming the whole thing, laughing and zooming in on Lily's shocked expression. The whole incident lasted maybe 30 seconds, but for Lily it felt like an eternity. That's when Frank, the elderly owner, finally snapped out of his shock. He came rushing from behind the counter, his face red with anger. "Get out of my diner right now. I'm calling the police," he shouted at the boys, pointing toward the door. Ryan just laughed, completely unbothered by the threat. "Whatever, old man. We're leaving anyway. This place is boring." The three boys walked toward the exit, still laughing and high-fiving each other like they had just done something impressive. Mike kept looking at his phone, already thinking about posting the video online. As the door closed behind them, the diner remained silent. Lily sat there, one hand on her stinging cheek, tears now flowing freely down her face. Frank rushed over to her, picking up her glasses and gently placing them back on her face. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have stopped them sooner," he said, his voice filled with regret. The other customers slowly came over, offering napkins and words of sympathy. But Lily could see it in their eyes. They felt guilty for not stepping in earlier. Their apologies felt hollow because when she really needed someone to stand up for her, everyone had just watched. Frank went to his office to call Lily's mother and tell her what happened. One of the waitresses brought Lily a glass of water and sat with her, holding her hand. The diner that had always felt like a safe haven now felt tainted, ruined by the cruelty of three boys who thought hurting someone weaker than them made them strong. What none of them knew was that one person in that diner wasn't going to let this go. A young waitress named Jessica, who had served Lily many times before, had watched the entire thing with growing rage. Unlike the others who felt helpless, Jessica knew exactly what to do. She had connections that could make sure those boys learned a lesson they would never forget. After the three boys left the diner, the atmosphere remained heavy and uncomfortable. Lily sat in her booth, quietly wiping her tears with napkins that the customers kept bringing her. Her cheeks were still red from where she had been slapped, and her hands trembled more than usual. Frank, the owner, came back from his office and told her that her mother was on the way and would be there in about 20 minutes. The other customers slowly went back to their tables, but nobody seemed to have an appetite anymore. The truck driver who had been reading his newspaper left money on his table and walked out without finishing his coffee. The elderly couple paid their bill and left quietly, avoiding eye contact with anyone. Everyone seemed to carry a heavy guilt with them, knowing they had witnessed something terrible and done nothing to stop it. Jessica, the waitress who had been working the afternoon shift, couldn't stop thinking about what she had just seen. She was a 24-year-old woman who had been working at Rose's diner for 3 years to help pay for her college classes. She wasn't just angry about what happened to Lily, she was absolutely furious. Her whole body was shaking, not from fear, but from pure rage. You see, Jessica understood what Lily was going through in a way that most people couldn't. She had a younger brother named Tommy, who was born with Down syndrome. Growing up, she had watched her brother face cruelty and mockery from people who didn't understand him. She had seen the pain in his eyes when kids at the playground refused to play with him. She had heard the cruel jokes and seen the stares from strangers who treated her brother like he was less than human. Because of Tommy, Jessica had developed a fierce protective instinct for anyone who was vulnerable or different. She couldn't stand bullies, especially the kind who targeted people with disabilities. To her, those boys didn't just slap Lily. They attacked everything Jessica believed in about treating people with dignity and respect. As she cleaned tables and refilled coffee cups, her mind was racing. She kept thinking about how scared Lily must have felt, how humiliated, how unsafe in a place that was supposed to be comfortable for her. Frank had mentioned calling the police, but Jessica knew how these things usually went. The boys were minors. They would probably get a slap on the wrist, maybe some community service, and then they would be back on the streets doing the same thing to someone else. That's when Jessica remembered something important. Her Uncle Danny was the president of a motorcycle club called the Iron Knights. Now, when most people think of motorcycle clubs, they picture dangerous criminals from movies. But the Iron Knights were different. Yes, they looked tough with their leather jackets, tattoos, and rumbling motorcycles. Yes, they were intimidating and not the kind of people you wanted to mess with. But they were also some of the most honorable people Jessica had ever known. The Iron Knights were known throughout the county for their charity work. They organized toy drives for children's hospitals during Christmas. They raised money for veterans who were struggling. They escorted funeral processions for fallen soldiers. And most importantly, they had a strict code about protecting the vulnerable members of their community. Jessica had heard stories about how the Iron Knights had dealt with domestic abusers, predators, and bullies in the past. They never broke the law, but they had ways of making sure bad people understood the consequences of their actions. Jessica's shift was supposed to end at 4 o'clock, but she couldn't think about anything except what had just happened. She kept glancing over at Lily, who was now talking quietly with her mother who had arrived to pick her up. Lily's mother looked devastated, holding her daughter and asking Frank what exactly had happened. Frank explained everything while Lily's mother's expression went from shock to anger to heartbreak. As soon as her shift ended, Jessica didn't even bother changing out of her work uniform. She walked straight out to the parking lot behind the diner, pulled out her phone and dialed her Uncle Danny's number. Her heart was pounding as the phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Finally, she heard his deep, gruff voice answer. "Hey, Jess, what's going on?" Uncle Danny asked. He could probably hear the tension in her voice even through the phone. Jessica took a deep breath and then told him everything. She described how the 3 boys had mocked Lily, how they had slapped her twice in front of everyone, how they had filmed it and laughed like it was entertainment. She told him about how none of the other customers did anything to help. She explained that Lily was just a 17-year-old girl who came to the diner every week after her therapy, and how this was supposed to be her safe place. As Jessica talked, she could hear her uncle's breathing getting heavier on the other end of the line. There was a long pause after she finished speaking. Then Uncle Danny said something that sent chills down her spine, but in a good way. "Give me an hour, Jess. We'll handle this." Jessica felt a wave of relief wash over her. She knew her uncle wouldn't let this go. "Thank you, Uncle Danny. Her name is Lily, and she's one of the sweetest people I know. She didn't deserve any of this." "Nobody deserves that, sweetheart," Uncle Danny replied, his voice firm and filled with determination. "Do you know where those boys went?" Jessica thought for a moment. "I heard one of them say something about going to the old movie theater parking lot. That's where kids from the high school usually hang out." "Perfect," Uncle Danny said. "Stay at the diner. We're coming there first." After hanging up, Jessica felt both nervous and satisfied. She knew she had just set something in motion that those 3 boys would never forget. She walked back into the diner and saw that Lily and her mother were still there, talking with Frank about whether they should file a police report. Jessica approached them carefully. "Lily, I just want you to know that what happened to you was wrong. And it's not going to go unanswered," Jessica said, kneeling down beside Lily's wheelchair so they were at eye level. "You're brave for coming here every week, and you have every right to feel safe in this diner. Some people are coming who will make sure you never have to be afraid here again." Lily looked confused but hopeful. Her mother asked, "What do you mean? Who's coming?" Jessica smiled mysteriously. "You'll see. Just trust me. And Frank, you might want to put on a fresh pot of coffee. We're going to have some important visitors in about an hour." Frank raised his eyebrows but didn't ask questions. He had known Jessica for years and trusted her judgment. If she said something was being handled, then something was definitely being handled. Outside the diner, about 15 miles away, Uncle Danny hung up his phone and walked into the garage where several members of the Iron Knights were working on their motorcycles. The garage smelled of oil and metal, and the sound of tools clanging echoed through the space. When the other members saw the look on Danny's face, they immediately stopped what they were doing. "We've got a situation," Danny announced, his voice carrying authority that made everyone pay attention. 3 punks just assaulted a disabled girl at my niece's diner. Beat her right in front of everyone. "We're riding out in 10 minutes. Nobody asked questions. Nobody hesitated." Within minutes, 12 members of the Iron Knights were putting on their leather vests with the club's insignia on the back. They checked their motorcycles, started their engines, and prepared to ride. The sound of 12 powerful motorcycles rumbling to life was like thunder rolling through the quiet neighborhood. These weren't young hothead bikers looking for a fight. Most of them were in their 40s and 50s, men who had lived hard lives and learned what really mattered. There was Big Tony, a former Marine who had served 3 tours overseas. There was Wheels, who got his nickname because his own daughter used a wheelchair after a car accident. There was Bear, whose sister had been born with a developmental disability. Each of these men had their own reasons for hating bullies, and each of them was ready to teach 3 boys a lesson in respect. As the Iron Knights rolled out of their garage in formation, heading toward Rose's diner, the rumble of their engines announced that something was about to change in that small town. The age of bullies getting away with cruelty was about to end, at least for Ryan, Cole, and Mike. Back at the diner, Frank made that fresh pot of coffee Jessica had suggested. Lily's mother decided they would stay a bit longer, sensing that something important was about to happen. Jessica kept glancing at the clock on the wall, counting down the minutes. And then, exactly 1 hour after the attack on Lily, everyone in the diner heard it, the deep, powerful rumble of multiple motorcycle engines approaching. The sound grew louder and louder, until it felt like it was shaking the very foundation of the building. Through the windows, they could see 12 motorcycles pulling into the parking lot in perfect formation, their chrome gleaming in the afternoon sun. The Iron Knights had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same again. The sound of 12 motorcycles pulling into the parking lot of Rose's diner was something nobody there would ever forget. It wasn't just loud, it was powerful, commanding, and impossible to ignore. The deep rumble of the engine seemed to vibrate through the air itself, making the windows of the diner rattle slightly. Every single person inside stopped what they were doing and turned to look out the windows. What they saw was both intimidating and strangely magnificent. 12 motorcycles, all perfectly maintained and gleaming in the afternoon sun, lined up in the parking lot like soldiers in formation. The riders dismounted in synchronized movements, their leather vests displaying the Iron Knights insignia on the back, a shield with a motorcycle, and the words "Protect and Serve the Community" underneath it. These weren't the kind of men you would want to meet in a dark alley if you had done something wrong. They were big, muscular, covered in tattoos, with weathered faces that told stories of hard lives and harder lessons learned. But there was something else about them, too. Something in the way they carried themselves that spoke of honor and purpose. Leading them was Uncle Danny, the president of the Iron Knights. He was a huge man, standing about 6'3" with broad shoulders and arms covered in tattoos that told the story of his life. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, and his eyes, though kind, had a sharpness to them that missed nothing. At 52 years old, he had been riding motorcycles for over 30 years and had led the Iron Knights for the past 15. The other customers in the diner looked nervous. An elderly man grabbed his wife's hand under the table. Frank, the owner, stood behind the counter watching carefully, but he wasn't afraid. He knew Jessica well enough to trust that whoever these people were, they were here for the right reasons. Jessica rushed out from behind the counter and ran straight to her uncle, giving him a tight hug. "Thank you for coming, Uncle Danny," she said, her voice filled with relief and gratitude. Danny hugged his niece back and then looked at her seriously. "Where is she?" he asked simply. Jessica turned and pointed toward the corner booth where Lily was sitting with her mother. The 12 bikers followed Jessica into the diner, their boots heavy on the floor, their presence filling the entire space. But the moment they approached Lily's booth, something amazing happened. These tough, intimidating men completely softened. Uncle Danny removed his sunglasses and knelt down beside Lily's wheelchair so he could look her in the eyes at her level. His voice, which had been commanding and strong outside, became gentle and respectful. "Hi there, sweetheart. My name is Danny. My niece Jessica works here, and she told me what happened to you today. I want you to know that what those boys did to you was wrong, cowardly, and absolutely unacceptable." Lily looked at this huge, tattooed man kneeling beside her wheelchair, and instead of feeling scared, she felt something she hadn't felt since the attack. Safe. There was something genuine in his eyes, a kindness that contradicted his tough appearance. She nodded, still unable to speak much because her throat was tight with emotion. Lily's mother, who had been protective and suspicious when she first saw the bikers enter, now felt tears forming in her eyes. She could see that these men were here to help, not to cause more trouble. "Thank you for coming," she managed to say. "My daughter didn't deserve what happened to her today." Danny looked up at Lily's mother and nodded seriously. "No, ma'am, she absolutely did not. And I promise you this. Those boys are going to learn a lesson today that they will never forget. Not through violence, because that's not who we are, but through understanding the real consequences of their actions." One by one, the other members of the Iron Knights introduced themselves to Lily. Each of them took a moment to kneel or sit at her level, showing her respect and making sure she didn't have to look up at them. Big Tony, the former Marine, told her that he had spent years defending people's freedom, and that included her freedom to eat a milkshake in peace without being harassed. Wheels, whose daughter also used a wheelchair, held Lily's hand gently and told her that she reminded him of his own daughter, and that she was braver than she probably realized. Bear, a massive man with a long beard and kind eyes, shared that his younger sister had been born with a developmental disability. "My sister taught me more about courage and strength than anyone else in my life," he said to Lily. "People like you face challenges every single day that most people can't even imagine. You're a warrior, young lady, whether you know it or not." As each biker shared their personal connection to disability, either through family members or friends, Lily began to understand something important. These weren't just tough guys on motorcycles. These were fathers, brothers, uncles, and friends who had been touched by disability in their own lives. They understood her struggle in a way that most people didn't. They didn't see her as someone to pity. They saw her as someone worth protecting and respecting. Frank approached the group with a tray of coffee cups, offering drinks to the bikers. "On the house, gentlemen," he said. "Thank you for coming to look after one of my favorite customers." Danny accepted a cup of coffee and took a sip before asking the question everyone was waiting for. "Now, does anyone know where those 3 boys went after they left here?" Jessica spoke up immediately. "I heard one of them mention the old movie theater parking lot. That's where the high school kids usually hang out after school. They were probably going there to show off the video they recorded." Danny's jaw tightened at the mention of the video. "They recorded it? So they're not just cruel, they're stupid too. That makes our job easier." He turned to his fellow bikers. "Mount up. Half of you come with me to find these boys. The other half stay here with Lily and make sure she feels safe." 6 of the bikers, including Danny, Big Tony, Bear, Wheels, and 2 others named Chains and Hawk, headed back to their motorcycles. The other 6 stayed in the diner, sitting at nearby tables and ordering coffee and pie, creating a protective presence around Lily. Their message was clear without words. As long as they were there, nothing bad would happen to this girl again. Before leaving, Danny turned back to Lily one more time. "Sweetheart, I need you to do me a favor. I need you to come back to this diner next Thursday. Same time as always. Don't let those boys take away your safe place. Don't let them win by making you too afraid to live your life. Can you do that for me?" Lily, who had barely spoken since the attack, found her voice. Despite her speech being affected by her condition, her words came out clear and strong. "I'll be here," she said with determination. Danny smiled, a genuine warm smile that transformed his tough face. "That's my girl. You're tougher than those 3 boys combined, and they're about to learn that." With that, the 6 bikers mounted their motorcycles, started their engines, and rolled out of the parking lot heading toward the old movie theater. The sound of their engines faded into the distance, leaving behind 6 protectors who had effectively turned Rose's diner into the safest place in town. Lily's mother squeezed her daughter's hand and whispered, "I think everything's going to be okay now." And for the first time since the attack, Lily believed it too. She looked around at the bikers sitting at nearby tables, some reading newspapers, others chatting quietly with Frank about the best pie flavors. They looked relaxed, but she could sense their awareness, their readiness to protect her if needed. It was like having her own personal guardians, and it made her feel valued and important in a way she never had before. Jessica brought Lily a fresh strawberry milkshake, this one on the house. "This is a new beginning," she said with a smile. "Those boys messed with the wrong girl, and they're about to find out why." Meanwhile, 15 minutes away at the old movie theater parking lot, 3 boys were laughing and showing a video to their friends. completely unaware that 6 motorcycles were heading their way, carrying men who were about to teach them the most important lesson of their young lives. The rumble of those approaching engines would soon wipe the smiles off their faces and replace their arrogance with something they had never felt before: real fear and real accountability. The Iron Knights were coming, and justice, the kind that doesn't involve courts or lawyers but instead involves looking yourself in the mirror and facing who you really are, was about to be served. The old movie theater had been closed for about 5 years, ever since the new multiplex opened across town. The building still stood there, faded and forgotten, with torn posters still hanging in the display cases and weeds growing through cracks in the parking lot. But even though the theater itself was dead, the parking lot had found new life as the unofficial hangout spot for teenagers from the local high school. On this particular Thursday afternoon, about 20 teenagers were scattered around the parking lot. Some were sitting on the hoods of their cars, others were skateboarding on the smooth sections of pavement, and a few were just standing around talking and laughing. Music played from someone's car speakers, and the atmosphere was relaxed and carefree. In the center of it all were Ryan, Cole, and Mike, the 3 boys who had attacked Lily at the diner about 90 minutes earlier. They were surrounded by a group of about 8 other teenagers, and Mike's phone was being passed around so everyone could watch the video of what they had done. With each viewing, the boys added their own commentary, making jokes and laughing as if they had done something impressive rather than something shameful. "Dude, did you see her face when Ryan slapped her?" Mike was saying, barely able to contain his laughter. That was priceless. Cole was acting out the scene, pretending to slap someone in slow motion while making exaggerated sound effects. Some of the watching teenagers laughed uncomfortably, not sure if they should find it funny or disturbing. Others genuinely seemed to think it was hilarious, which said something sad about the kind of people they were becoming. Ryan, who had actually done the hitting, was basking in the attention. He felt powerful, important, like he had done something that made him stand out. In his twisted mind, being cruel to someone vulnerable had elevated his status among his peers. He had no idea that the consequences of his actions were currently riding toward him on 6 powerful motorcycles. The sound reached them before the sight did. At first it was just a distant rumble, like thunder on the horizon. A few of the teenagers looked around, confused about where the noise was coming from, but Ryan and his friends were too absorbed in their performance to notice. They were too busy replaying the video for the 10th time, pointing out their favorite parts, completely oblivious to what was approaching. Then the rumble got louder. And louder, and suddenly it wasn't distant anymore, it was right there, echoing off the walls of the abandoned theater and filling the entire parking lot with sound. That's when the teenagers finally looked up and saw 6 motorcycles turning into the parking lot entrance, riding in a tight formation that spoke of discipline and purpose. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The teenagers who had been skateboarding grabbed their boards and quickly moved to the side. The ones sitting on cars slid off and took a few steps back. The music from the car speakers suddenly seemed way too loud, and someone quickly turned it off. An uncomfortable silence fell over the parking lot, broken only by the rumbling engines of the approaching motorcycles. The 6 bikers, Uncle Danny, Big Tony, Bear, Wheels, Chains, and Hawk, rode their motorcycles in a slow circle around the gathered teenagers, before coming to a stop right in front of Ryan, Cole, and Mike. They formed a semicircle, their bikes creating a wall of chrome and leather that blocked any easy escape route. Then, in perfect synchronization, they killed their engines. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that parking lot. Every teenager there was frozen, unsure of what was happening but certain it wasn't good. Ryan, Cole, and Mike felt their stomachs drop. The confidence and arrogance they had been displaying just moments ago evaporated instantly. Uncle Danny was the first to dismount. He removed his sunglasses slowly, deliberately, his eyes scanning the crowd before settling on the 3 boys in the center. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at them, and that look was more terrifying than any words could have been. It was the look of a man who had seen these types of boys before, who understood exactly what kind of cowards they were, and who was completely unimpressed by their tough guy act. The other bikers dismounted as well, standing beside their motorcycles with their arms crossed. They didn't need to make threats or act aggressive. Their presence alone was enough. These were grown men, some of them veterans, all of them with decades of life experience. They made the teenage boys look exactly like what they were, Children playing at being tough without understanding what real strength meant. "Which one of you is Ryan?" Danny asked, his voice calm but carrying an edge that made it clear this wasn't a friendly question. Ryan's mouth went dry. He wanted to run, but his legs felt like they were made of cement. He also knew that running would only make things worse. Somehow he managed to raise his hand slightly, like a student in class answering a question he wished the teacher hadn't asked. I am," he stammered. Danny took a step closer and Ryan instinctively took a step back. "Don't move," Danny said firmly, and Ryan froze. "You like hitting people who can't defend themselves, Ryan?" Ryan didn't know how to answer. He looked at his friends for support, but Cole and Mike were staring at the ground, suddenly very interested in their shoes. The other teenagers had all taken several steps back, creating distance between themselves and the three boys, as if whatever was about to happen might be contagious. "I asked you a question," Danny continued, his voice never rising but somehow becoming more intense. "Do you like hitting people who can't defend themselves?" It was just a joke," Ryan tried to explain, his voice cracking. "We didn't mean anything by it." Bear, the massive biker with the long beard, let out a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a growl. "A joke? You think slapping a disabled girl is a joke? Let me tell you something about jokes, kid. Jokes are supposed to be funny. What you did wasn't funny. It was evil." Cole, who had been trying to make himself invisible, suddenly found himself being addressed by Big Tony, the former Marine. "You," Tony said, pointing directly at Cole. "You hit her second, didn't you? You saw your friend hit a defenseless girl, and instead of being disgusted, instead of being a decent human being, you decided to join in. What kind of man does that make you?" Cole couldn't answer. Tears were starting to form in his eyes and he was shaking. This wasn't how this day was supposed to go. They were supposed to be the tough guys, the ones everyone feared and respected. Now they were being called out by real men and they had no defense, no excuse, no way to justify what they had done. Chains, a biker with graying hair and a scar across his cheek, addressed Mike. "And you," he said with disgust in his voice, "you filmed it. You recorded a crime, an assault on a minor, and you thought that was something to be proud of. You thought that was content to share with your friends." Mike was crying now, openly and without shame. "I'm sorry," he sobbed. "I'm so sorry." "You're not sorry," Wheels said, rolling forward slightly on his motorcycle. "Not yet, anyway. You're scared, and that's not the same thing as sorry. Sorry is what you feel when you understand the harm you've caused. Scared is just what you feel when you realize you might face consequences. There's a big difference, kid." Danny looked at all three boys, his expression a mixture of anger and something else, disappointment. "Do you boys know who we are?" he asked. They shook their heads, too scared to speak. "We're the Iron Knights. We're a motorcycle club that's been in this community for 30 years. We raise money for kids with cancer. We help veterans who are struggling. We escort the funerals of fallen heroes. And we have one rule that we never ever break. We protect the vulnerable members of our community from people like you." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "That girl you attacked today, her name is Lily. She goes to Rose's Diner every Thursday after her physical therapy. That diner is her safe place, somewhere she can just be herself without judgment or cruelty. And you three decided to take that away from her. You decided that her disability made her an acceptable target for your entertainment." Ryan tried to speak, to offer some kind of explanation or apology, but Danny held up his hand. "I don't want to hear it, not yet. First, you're going to listen. You're going to hear from each of these men about why what you did matters, about how it affects real people, about the kind of person you become when you treat others like that. For the next 20 minutes, while the other teenagers watched in complete silence, each of the 6 bikers shared their stories. Big Tony talked about coming home from war and seeing how society treated wounded veterans, especially those with visible disabilities. He talked about the shame of watching people stare or make comments, and how it took more courage to face that every day than it took to face enemy fire. Bear shared about his sister, who had been born different and had faced bullying her entire life. He described finding her crying in her room after school, describing how kids had mocked her and imitated her speech. "She never hurt anyone," Bear said, his voice thick with emotion. "She was the kindest, gentlest person you'd ever meet. But people like you decided she was less than human because she was different. Do you have any idea what that does to a person?" Wheels talked about his daughter, who had been a star athlete before a drunk driver hit her car and left her paralyzed from the waist down. The very next morning, Friday at 6 in the morning, Ryan's phone rang. He groaned and reached for it, squinting at the bright screen in his dark bedroom. It was an unknown number. He almost declined the call and went back to sleep, but something made him answer. "Hello?" he mumbled groggily. "Rise and shine, Ryan. This is Danny from the Iron Knights. You and your 2 friends have 30 minutes to meet us at the Community Hope Center on 5th Street. Don't be late." The line went dead before Ryan could respond. Ryan sat up in bed, his heart suddenly pounding. He had hoped, maybe even believed, that yesterday's encounter with the bikers had been the end of it, that they had been scared straight and could just go back to their normal lives. But apparently that's not how this was going to work. He quickly called Cole and Mike, waking them both up with the news. They all lived within a few blocks of each other, so they agreed to meet at the corner and walk to the center together. None of them had any idea what the Community Hope Center was or what they would be doing there. When they arrived, still rubbing sleep from their eyes, they found Uncle Danny and 3 other members of the Iron Knights waiting for them outside a building they had driven past hundreds of times but never really noticed. The Community Hope Center was a place that provided services and activities for people with various disabilities. It offered job training, social programs, art classes, and support groups. "Glad you could make it," Danny said, though his tone suggested that being late would have had serious consequences. "For the next 6 months, you're going to volunteer here every Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning from 6 to noon. You'll help with whatever needs to be done, setting up activities, cleaning, assisting the staff, and most importantly, actually talking to and learning from the people who come here." Cole looked panicked. "But I have plans on weekends. You had plans," Bear interrupted, his voice firm. "Now you have responsibilities. You wanted to act like tough guys. Well, tough guys keep their commitments. Tough guys do hard things. This is hard, so prove you're as tough as you thought you were." The director of the center, a kind woman named Mrs. Patricia Johnson, came out to meet them. She was in her 60s with gray hair and gentle eyes that had seen a lot of pain, but had never lost their warmth. Danny had called her the night before and explained the situation. She had agreed to take the boys on as volunteers, though she was skeptical about whether they would actually change. "Welcome, boys," she said, her voice neither warm nor cold, just neutral. "We have a lot of work to do this morning. People will start arriving at 7 for our breakfast program. You'll help in the kitchen, serve food, and then clean up afterward. After that, you'll assist with our morning activities." The boys followed Mrs. Johnson inside, and for the first time they were immersed in a world they had always ignored. The center was bright and cheerful, with colorful murals on the walls and adaptive equipment everywhere. There were ramps instead of stairs, special tables that wheelchairs could fit under, and communication boards for people who had trouble speaking. In the kitchen, they were put to work immediately. They helped prepare scrambled eggs, toast, and fruit cups. At first, they worked in silence, still too scared and uncomfortable to talk much. But then the participants started arriving and everything changed. The first person to come through the door was a man in his 30s named Kevin, who had Down syndrome. He rolled up in his wheelchair with the biggest smile on his face, greeting everyone with enthusiasm. "Good morning." "Good morning."
"Is it Pancake Day?"
he asked hopefully. Mrs. Johnson smiled. "Not today, Kevin, but we have scrambled eggs and your favorite strawberries." Kevin's face lit up even more. "I love strawberries." He then noticed the 3 new boys in the kitchen and wheeled over to them. "Are you new friends? My name is Kevin. What's your names?" Ryan, Cole, and Mike exchanged uncomfortable glances. This wasn't what they expected. They had assumed people with disabilities would be quiet, withdrawn, maybe even sad. But Kevin was more enthusiastic and friendly than most people they knew. Mike was the first to respond. "I'm Mike. This is Ryan and Cole. Nice to meet you," Kevin said, shaking each of their hands vigorously. "Do you like strawberries too? They're the best fruit, I think." More people started arriving. There was Jennifer, a young woman with cerebral palsy who used a walker and had a sharp sense of humor. There was David, an older man with autism who didn't make eye contact but had an incredible memory for dates, and could tell you what day of the week any date in history fell on. There was a group of teenagers who were part of a social skills program, all dealing with various challenges but all excited about their day. As the boys served breakfast, something unexpected started to happen. They began to see these people as individuals. not as a group defined by their disabilities. Kevin told funny stories about his job at a local grocery store where he helped bag groceries. Jennifer made jokes about her physical therapy sessions that had everyone laughing. David shared fascinating historical facts that impressed even the staff. After breakfast, the boys helped clean up the kitchen and dining area. Then came the morning activities. Mrs. Johnson divided them up to help with different programs. Ryan was assigned to help with an art class where participants were painting. Cole helped with a music therapy session. Mike assisted with a computer skills class. Ryan found himself sitting next to a girl about his age named Christine, who had a similar condition to Lily. Her hands shook as she tried to paint, and at first Ryan felt that familiar discomfort. But Christine was patient with herself, and she talked to him while she worked. She explained that she was painting a picture of her dog, a golden retriever named Buddy, who was her best friend. "Does it bother you when people stare?" Ryan found himself asking, surprising himself with his honesty. Christine paused her painting and looked at him thoughtfully. "At first it did. It made me really sad and angry. But my mom taught me something important. She said that people stare at things they don't understand, and instead of being mad, I could help them understand. So now when people stare, I usually just smile at them or say hi. Most of the time they're actually nice, they just didn't know how to act around me." Ryan thought about that. He and his friends hadn't just stared at Lily. They had actively hurt her. They hadn't been curious or unsure, they had been cruel. The difference suddenly seemed huge and important. In the music room, Cole was helping set up instruments for people with limited mobility. There were drums with special mallets, keyboards with enlarged keys, and other adaptive instruments he had never seen before. A boy named Marcus, who had limited use of his hands due to a birth injury, showed Cole how he had learned to play the drums using special sticks attached to his arms. "Music doesn't care how you make it," Marcus explained as he demonstrated an impressive drum roll. "It just cares that you make it. My music teacher taught me that. Everyone told my parents I'd never be able to play an instrument, but here I am proving them wrong." Cole watched in amazement as Marcus played a complex rhythm, his face showing pure joy and concentration. Cole had played guitar for years and had always taken his ability to do so for granted. He had never thought about what it would be like to want to create music, but not have the physical ability to do it in the traditional way. Watching Marcus overcome those challenges with creativity and determination was humbling. Mike's experience in the computer class was equally eye-opening. He was helping a woman named Mrs. Helen, who was in her 70s and had recently had a stroke that affected her right side. She was learning to use the computer with just her left hand, and it was slow, frustrating work. But she never gave up. She was determined to email her grandchildren who lived across the country. "Technology is amazing," Mrs. Helen said as she carefully typed with one hand. "My grandkids send me pictures of their lives. I get to see them grow up even though I can't travel anymore. This computer is my window to their world." Mike thought about how he had used his phone to record Lily's assault, planning to share it for laughs and likes on social media. He had used technology for cruelty. Mrs. Helen was using it to stay connected to the people she loved. The contrast made him feel sick with shame. When noon finally arrived and their shift was over, the three boys walked out of the Community Hope Center completely exhausted. It had been 6 hours, but it felt like 6 days. They were physically tired from all the work, but more than that, they were emotionally drained. Everything they had believed about people with disabilities had been challenged, and in many cases, completely shattered. Uncle Danny was waiting for them outside, leaning against his motorcycle. "How was your first day?" he asked. The boys looked at each other, not sure how to answer. Finally, Ryan spoke up. "It was different than I expected," Danny nodded. "Different how?" "I thought—" Ryan paused, trying to find the right words. "I thought they would all be sad or need constant help. But they're just people. Regular people who happen to have some challenges. Some of them are funnier than my friends. Some of them are smarter than me. They're just people. That's the first lesson," Danny said. "Disability doesn't define a person. It's just one part of who they are, like having brown hair or being tall." 3 weeks had passed since that first day at the Community Hope Center, and the boys had been showing up every weekend without fail. Uncle Danny and the other Iron Knights checked in regularly, sometimes just watching from a distance to make sure the boys were actually participating and not just going through the motions. What they saw was encouraging. The boys were changing, slowly but genuinely. Ryan had started staying extra hours to help Kevin practice his reading. Cole had learned some basic sign language to communicate better with a deaf participant in the music program. Mike had taught Mrs. Helen how to use video calling so she could see her grandchildren's faces, not just their photos. These weren't the same arrogant, cruel boys who had walked into the diner that day. But Uncle Danny knew that volunteer work alone wasn't enough. The boys needed to face what they had actually done. They needed to confront their victim and truly understand the harm they had caused. That's why on a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks after the incident, Danny called each of the boys. "This Thursday at 3 o'clock, you're meeting me at Rose's Diner," he told them. "Lily will be there and you're going to apologize to her. Not a quick sorry and then you leave. A real apology where you look her in the eyes and take responsibility for what you did." Ryan felt his stomach drop when he got the call. He had been dreading this moment since the day at the movie theater parking lot. Facing people at the center was one thing. They didn't know what he had done. But Lily knew. She had felt his hand across her face. She had experienced his cruelty firsthand. How could he possibly face her? That Thursday, all 3 boys arrived at the diner at 2:30, 30 minutes early. They were too nervous to be late. They sat in Danny's truck in the parking lot, none of them wanting to go inside yet. Their hands were sweating, their hearts were racing, and they all felt sick to their stomachs. "What if she hates us?" Cole asked quietly. "She has every right to hate us," Ryan replied. "We were monsters to her." "Maybe that's why we need to do this," Mike said. "Not for us, but for her. She deserves to hear that what happened wasn't her fault, that she didn't do anything wrong, that we were the problem, not her." At exactly 3 o'clock, they saw Lily's mother's van pull into the parking lot. It had a wheelchair lift on the side. They watched as Lily's wheelchair was lowered to the ground and Lily rolled toward the diner entrance. She looked nervous too, which made the boys feel even worse. She shouldn't have to be nervous about coming to her safe place. Uncle Danny appeared from inside the diner and motioned for the boys to come in. With legs that felt like lead, they walked through the door. The diner was mostly empty. It was between lunch and dinner rush. Frank had agreed to close the diner to regular customers for this hour, to give them privacy for this important moment. Inside, Lily was sitting at her usual corner booth. Her mother sat beside her, one protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Jessica, the waitress who had called the Iron Knights, stood nearby. And around the perimeter of the diner, like silent guardians, stood 6 members of the Iron Knights, including Danny, Bear, and Big Tony. Their presence sent a clear message to the boys. Lily was protected, and if this didn't go well, there would be consequences. The boys stood awkwardly near the entrance, not sure what to do. Danny nodded toward Lily's booth. "Go on," he said firmly. "You asked for this chance. Don't waste it." Ryan led the way, followed by Cole and Mike. When they reached the booth, they stopped, standing there in front of Lily. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Lily looked at them and they could see fear in her eyes, but also courage. She was facing the people who had hurt her, which took more bravery than they could imagine. Finally, Ryan knelt down so he was at eye level with Lily, just like the bikers had done. Cole and Mike followed his lead. They were no longer looking down at her but meeting her as equals. Ryan's voice cracked as he began to speak. "Lily, my name is Ryan. I'm the person who hit you first that day. I don't have any excuse for what I did. I can't explain it away or make it sound less terrible than it was. I saw you sitting there, and instead of seeing another person, I saw someone I thought I could hurt for entertainment. I was cruel and I was wrong, and I am so deeply sorry." Tears were streaming down Ryan's face now and his voice was shaking. "I've spent the last 3 weeks volunteering at the Community Hope Center, and I've met so many amazing people. I've learned about the challenges you face every single day, challenges I never even thought about. I've learned that disability doesn't make someone weak or less than. It often makes them stronger and braver than people like me could ever be." He paused, trying to gather his composure. "What I did to you was assault. It was a crime. And more than that, it was an attack on your dignity as a human being. You didn't deserve that. You never deserved that. Nothing you did or didn't do could ever justify what I did to you. The fault is entirely mine, and I will carry the shame of that action for the rest of my life." Cole spoke next, his voice equally emotional. "Lily, I'm Cole. I'm the one who hit you second. I watched Ryan hurt you, and instead of stopping him, instead of helping you, I joined in. That makes me just as guilty. Maybe even more so because I had a chance to do the right thing and I chose cruelty instead. I'm sorry for the pain I caused you. I'm sorry for making you feel unsafe in a place that was supposed to be your refuge. I'm sorry for being a coward." Then Mike took his turn. "Lily, I'm Mike. I'm the one who filmed it. I thought recording your pain and humiliation was something to be proud of, something to share with people. I wanted likes and views and attention, and I didn't care that I was using your suffering to get it. I've deleted that video. I've told everyone I showed it to how wrong it was. But I know that doesn't undo the harm. Nothing can undo it. I violated your privacy, your dignity, and your basic human rights. I'm sorry." All three boys were crying openly now, their faces red and wet with tears, but they didn't look away from Lily. They held her gaze, letting her see their genuine remorse and shame. Lily sat quietly for a moment, processing everything they had said. Her mother squeezed her shoulder supportively, letting her know she could respond however she wanted. Lily could accept their apology or reject it. She could yell at them or stay silent. Whatever she chose, the Iron Knights would support her decision. When Lily finally spoke, her voice was soft but clear, despite her speech impediment making certain words difficult. "Do you know what the worst part was?" she asked them. "It wasn't the pain from being slapped. It wasn't even the embarrassment. It was realizing that people could look at me and see something it's okay to hurt. That's what you did to me. You made me feel less than human." The boys absorbed her words like physical blows. They had known they hurt her, but hearing her describe it made it so much more real. Lily continued, "After you left, I didn't want to come back here. This was my favorite place, and you took that away from me. I was scared to go anywhere by myself, thinking there might be more people like you waiting to hurt me. You didn't just attack my body, you attacked my sense of safety in the world." Ryan's voice was barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, Lily. I would do anything to take it back." "But you can't," Lily said, and there was strength in her voice now. "You can't undo it. That day will always be part of my story now. But—" She paused, looking at each of them carefully. "Mr. Danny told me about what you've been doing. He told me you've been volunteering, that you've been learning, that you've been trying to become better people. Is that true?" All three boys nodded. Mike spoke up. "We've met so many incredible people at the center. People who face challenges every day that we can't even imagine, and they do it with courage and kindness. They've taught us more in 3 weeks than we learned in our whole lives before that. We're not asking you to forgive us, we don't deserve that. But we want you to know that we're trying to make sure we never hurt anyone like this again." Lily looked at her mother, who nodded encouragingly. Then she looked back at the boys. "I don't forgive you," she said honestly, and the boys nodded, accepting that. "But I believe that people can change. Mr. Danny and the Iron Knights wouldn't be here supporting you if they didn't see something worth saving in you. So I'm not going to forgive you, but I'm going to give you the chance to prove that you're becoming better people." She paused, then added something that surprised everyone. "And I want to ask you for something. I want you to keep volunteering at the center, not because you have to, but because you choose to. And I want you to speak up when you see other people being bullied or treated badly. Use what you've learned to protect people instead of hurting them." "Can you do that?" The boys were stunned. Even after everything they had done to her, Lily was thinking about how they could help others. She wasn't focused on revenge or punishment. She was focused on making sure no one else experienced what she had experienced. Her maturity and grace in that moment showed more strength than the boys had ever demonstrated in their entire lives. "Yes," Ryan said firmly. "We can do that." "We will do that, I promise," Cole added. "I'll never stand by and watch someone get hurt again." "Neither will I," Mike said. "And I'll use my phone to document good things, not cruel things." Uncle Danny stepped forward. "Lily, these boys have also prepared something else for you." 3 months had passed since the day Ryan, Cole, and Mike apologized to Lily at Rose's diner. The boys had continued their volunteer work at the Community Hope Center every weekend without fail, but something had shifted. What started as an obligation, a punishment they had to endure, had transformed into something they genuinely cared about. They weren't just showing up anymore, they were truly present and engaged. Ryan had become particularly close to Kevin, the enthusiastic man with Down syndrome who loved strawberries. They had started meeting for lunch once a week, just the two of them, talking about everything from sports to movies to Kevin's job at the grocery store. Kevin had taught Ryan something important, that friendship doesn't require both people to be the same. It just requires both people to care. Cole had joined the music therapy program not as a helper but as a participant. He brought his guitar and started playing alongside Marcus and the others, creating music that blended traditional instruments with adaptive ones. They had even started a small band that performed at the center's monthly gatherings. Cole had never felt more proud of any musical accomplishment. Mike had become the center's unofficial technology teacher, helping people learn to use computers, tablets, and smartphones to stay connected with their families. Mrs. Helen was now video calling her grandchildren every Sunday, and she credited Mike with giving her that gift. He had learned that technology could bring people together instead of tearing them apart. But Uncle Danny knew that their transformation needed to go beyond the walls of the Community Hope Center. If they were truly going to change, they needed to take what they had learned back into their everyday lives. That meant facing the place where they had learned their cruelty in the first place, their high school. It was a Monday morning when Danny called all 3 boys to meet him at a coffee shop near their school. When they arrived, he was sitting at a corner table with a serious expression on his face. The boys sat down, curious about what was coming next. "You've done good work at the center," Danny began. "Really good work. Mrs. Johnson tells me you're 3 of the best volunteers they've ever had. But volunteering in a controlled environment is one thing. Living differently in the real world is another." The boys nodded, waiting for him to continue. "Your school has a bullying problem," Danny stated bluntly. "Not just with you 3, but with lots of students. Kids getting picked on for being different, whether that's because of a disability, their appearance, their interests, whatever. You know this is true because you were part of that culture." Ryan shifted uncomfortably in his seat. He knew exactly what Danny was talking about. Their school had always had a cruel undercurrent, where being different was social suicide and fitting in meant keeping your head down or joining in the mockery. "What I'm asking you to do is hard," Danny continued. "I want you to speak out. I want you to use your voices and your story to change the culture at your school. You were bullies and now you're becoming better people. Share that journey. Let other students know that cruelty isn't strength and kindness isn't weakness." Cole spoke up. "How are we supposed to do that? Nobody's going to listen to us. We're not popular or influential or anything like that." "That's where you're wrong," Danny said. "You 3 have something powerful: authenticity. You're not coming at this from some moral high ground. You're coming from the bottom, from the place of having been the bad guys and choosing to change. That's more powerful than you realize." Over the next week, with guidance from Danny and the Iron Knights, the boys put together a presentation for their school. They worked with the principal, who had heard about their volunteer work and their transformation through the community grapevine. She agreed to give them 30 minutes during an assembly to share their story. The day of the assembly, the entire high school filed into the auditorium, over 800 students and faculty members. The boys stood backstage, their hands shaking with nervousness. This was different from apologizing to Lily in a quiet diner. This was putting themselves on display in front of everyone they knew, admitting their failures and asking others to do better. Uncle Danny was backstage with them, along with Bear and Big Tony. "Remember," Danny told them, "you're not doing this for applause or praise. You're doing this because it's right. You're doing this because somewhere in that audience is a kid who's being bullied, and maybe your words will help them. And somewhere in that audience is a bully who could choose to change just like you did." When their names were called, the boys walked out onto the stage. The auditorium fell silent, partly out of respect for assembly rules, but mostly out of curiosity. Everyone had heard rumors about what happened to these 3 after their incident at the diner, but nobody knew the full story. Ryan stepped up to the microphone first. His voice was shaky at first, but it grew stronger as he spoke. 3 months ago, my friends and I did something terrible. We attacked a girl with a disability at a diner. We slapped her, mocked her, and filmed it for entertainment. I'm not going to sugarcoat it or make excuses. We were bullies and we were cruel." The audience stirred. This wasn't what they expected. Most assemblies about bullying featured adults lecturing them or motivational speakers with inspiring stories. This was different. This was one of their own, confessing to real wrongdoing. Ryan continued, "I used to think that being tough meant being mean. I thought putting other people down made me bigger. I thought disability was something to make fun of, something that made people less than me. I was completely and totally wrong." He went on to describe what happened after the incident, how the Iron Knights found them, how they were given a choice between legal consequences and real change. He talked about his first day at the Community Hope Center, how terrified and uncomfortable he was, and how his entire worldview was challenged. "I met people who face more challenges before breakfast than I face in a month," Ryan said, "and they face those challenges with courage, humor, and kindness." Kevin, a man with Down syndrome, became my friend. He taught me what real strength looks like. It's not about intimidating people or making others feel small. It's about facing your challenges with dignity and treating others with respect even when they don't deserve it. Cole took the microphone next. I used to follow along with whatever my friends did. If they were being cruel, I joined in because I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be accepted. But I've learned something important. Being accepted by cruel people isn't worth anything. I'd rather be alone than be part of a group that hurts others. He shared his experience in the music therapy program, how he learned to make music with people who had different abilities. Marcus plays drums better than I play guitar, and he has to use special equipment just to hold the drumsticks. He works 10 times harder than I ever have at music, and he does it with a smile on his face. He doesn't complain. He doesn't make excuses. He just does the work. That's who I want to be like. Mike was last to speak, and he was the most emotional of the three. I filmed what we did to that girl. I thought recording someone's pain was funny, that it would get me views and likes and make me popular. I was using technology to spread cruelty, and I'm ashamed of that. His voice cracked, and he paused to collect himself. But I've learned that technology can connect people instead of dividing them. I've been teaching computer skills at the Community Hope Center, helping people video call their families, stay connected with friends, and access information. Mrs. Helen, a woman who had a stroke, can now see her grandchildren's faces every week because I taught her how to video call. That feels better than any amount of likes or views ever did. The three boys stood together at the microphone for their final message. Ryan spoke for all of them. "We're not here to tell you we're heroes or that we've completely changed. We still mess up. We still have moments where our old thinking creeps in, but we're trying every single day to be better than we were. We're here to tell you that if you're bullying someone, anyone, for any reason, you need to stop," Cole added. "It's not funny. It's not cool. It's cruelty, plain and simple. And it damages people in ways you can't see." Mike finished with, "And if you're being bullied, please tell someone. Tell a teacher, tell your parents, tell someone who can help. You don't deserve to suffer in silence. You deserve to feel safe at school just like everyone else." The auditorium was completely silent when they finished. Then slowly one person started clapping. Then another, then more. Within seconds, most of the auditorium was applauding. But not everyone. Some students sat with their arms crossed, looking skeptical or annoyed. The boys knew their message wouldn't reach everyone, and that was okay. They weren't trying to reach everyone. They were trying to reach the ones who needed to hear it. After the assembly, something unexpected happened. Students started approaching the boys in the hallways. Some thanked them for their honesty. Others shared their own experiences of being bullied or of being bullies themselves. A girl named Sophia, who walked with crutches due to a birth condition, told Ryan that she had been too afraid to eat in the cafeteria because people made fun of the way she walked. She asked if maybe he could eat lunch with her sometime so she wouldn't be alone. Ryan didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." 6 months had passed since that terrible Thursday afternoon when 3 boys attacked a vulnerable girl in a diner. Those 6 months had brought changes that nobody could have predicted. Changes that rippled through an entire community and touched more lives than anyone could count. It was now a Thursday afternoon again, and Rose's diner looked different than it had half a year ago. The parking lot was filled not just with regular cars, but also with a row of motorcycles belonging to the Iron Knights. This had become their tradition. Every Thursday at 3 o'clock, at least 6 members of the motorcycle club would meet at the diner for coffee and pie. Their presence had transformed the small restaurant into what everyone in town now called the safest place around. Inside the diner, Lily sat at her usual corner booth, but she wasn't alone anymore. Sitting with her were Christine from the Community Hope Center, Sophia from the school lunch table, and 2 other young women who used wheelchairs and had heard about the diner from others. They were laughing and talking, sharing stories about their week, completely comfortable and at ease. This booth had become their meeting spot, their safe space where they could just be themselves without judgment or stares. Frank, The elderly owner moved through the diner with a spring in his step that hadn't been there before. His restaurant had become something special, something more than just a place to eat. It had become a symbol in the community, proof that good people exist and that standing up for what's right matters. Business had actually increased since word spread about what the Iron Knights had done. People wanted to support a place that supported the vulnerable. Jessica, the waitress who had made that crucial phone call 6 months ago, was now the assistant manager. Frank had promoted her, recognizing that her courage and quick thinking had been part of what made this transformation possible. She moved between tables, greeting regular customers by name and making sure everyone felt welcome, especially those who might feel out of place elsewhere. At a large table in the center of the diner sat Uncle Danny, Bear, Big Tony, Wheels, Chains, and Hawk, the 6 Iron Knights who had confronted the boys that day. They were drinking coffee and eating pie as they did every Thursday. But they were also keeping watch, their presence a reminder that cruelty would not be tolerated here or anywhere else in their community. The bell above the door chimed, and 3 young men walked in. Ryan, Cole, and Mike had also made Thursday at Rose's Diner part of their routine, but they weren't coming to cause trouble. They were coming to continue their education. Every Thursday after their volunteer shift at the Community Hope Center, which they still attended religiously, they came to the diner to have coffee with the Iron Knights and report on what they had been doing. Today, though, they had someone with them. A 16-year-old boy named Tommy who looked nervous and uncomfortable. The Iron Knights noticed immediately, reading the situation with the wisdom that comes from experience. This boy was there for a reason, and that reason probably wasn't good. The 3 young men approached the bikers' table and Ryan spoke first. "Uncle Danny, we have a situation we need your help with. This is Tommy. He goes to our school and he's been having some problems with bullying." Tommy stood there awkwardly, his eyes downcast. He was a small kid, barely 5'4", with glasses and acne. He looked exactly like the kind of kid who would be a target for bullies, which he was. Uncle Danny gestured to some empty chairs. "Sit down, son. Tell us what's going on." Tommy sat, still not making eye contact. Cole spoke for him at first. "There's a group of guys at our school, seniors, who have been targeting Tommy for months. They push him around, steal his lunch money, post cruel things about him online. We tried talking to them, tried standing up to them like you taught us, but they won't listen. They're bigger and older, and honestly, we're not sure what to do." Bear leaned forward, his massive arms crossed on the table. "Tommy, look at me." The boy slowly raised his eyes. "Has anyone at your school done anything to help you? Teachers, principal? Anyone?" Tommy shook his head. "I've reported it 3 times. They say they'll look into it, but nothing changes. My mom wants to pull me out of school, but I don't want to leave. I shouldn't have to leave because other people are jerks." "You're absolutely right," Uncle Danny said. "You shouldn't have to leave. They should have to change their behavior." He looked at Ryan, Cole, and Mike with approval. "You boys did the right thing bringing this to us. You recognized a situation you couldn't handle alone and you asked for help. That's maturity." Big Tony pulled out his phone. "What are the names of these seniors who are bothering you?" Tommy rattled off 4 names and Big Tony made a note of them. "Leave this with us, kid. By Monday, those boys will leave you alone. I guarantee it." "How?" Tommy asked, skeptical. "What can you do that the school can't?" Wheels smiled. "We have our ways. We don't break laws and we don't use violence. But we have a way of making people understand the consequences of their actions. Trust us." Over the weekend, the Iron Knights did what they did best. They investigated the 4 bullies, learning about their families, their interests, their vulnerabilities. They discovered that one of the boys' fathers was a businessman who prided himself on his reputation in the community. Another boy was trying to get a football scholarship and couldn't afford any trouble on his record. The third was working part-time at an auto shop that happened to be owned by a friend of the Iron Knights. The 4th boy's mother was a teacher who would be devastated to learn what her son had been doing. On Monday morning, before school started, 4 families received visits from members of the Iron Knights. The conversations were always respectful but firm. The bikers explained what their sons had been doing, provided evidence they had gathered from other students, and made it clear that this behavior needed to stop immediately. They didn't threaten. They didn't need to. The weight of having these imposing men show up at their homes, knowing what their children had done, was enough. By Monday afternoon, all 4 of the bullies had separately approached Tommy to apologize. The apologies ranged from genuine to grudging, But the message was clear: the bullying was over. Tommy walked through the halls that day with his head a little higher, and Ryan, Cole, and Mike walked beside him, making sure everyone knew he was under their protection. This had become the new pattern. The Iron Knights had become unofficial protectors of the vulnerable throughout the community. When someone was being harassed or bullied, when someone with a disability was being treated unfairly, when someone needed help that traditional authorities weren't providing, people called the Iron Knights, and the Iron Knights responded, not with violence or intimidation in the criminal sense, but with accountability and education. Back at the Community Hope Center, Mrs. Johnson had seen remarkable changes as well. The center had received increased funding after the local newspaper ran a story about Ryan, Cole, and Mike's transformation. The story, titled "From Bullies to Brothers: How One Incident Changed a Community," had touched hearts throughout the region. Donations poured in, allowing the center to expand its programs and serve more people. The three young men had become permanent fixtures at the center, no longer just volunteers but almost like staff members. Ryan had started a peer mentorship program, pairing young people with disabilities with volunteer mentors who could offer friendship and support. Cole had organized regular music showcases where participants could perform for audiences and feel the joy of sharing their talents. Mike had secured donations of computers and tablets, creating a technology lab where people could learn digital skills. Kevin, the man with Down syndrome who loved strawberries, had become something of a local celebrity. The newspaper story had featured him prominently, and he had been invited to speak at several schools about his friendship with Ryan and what it meant to him. His message was simple but powerful. Everyone deserves a friend, and everyone can be a friend if they choose kindness. At the high school, the safe table in the cafeteria had grown to 3 tables pushed together. What started with a handful of students had expanded to over 40 regular attendees. The table had become a statement. Being different was not just acceptable, it was celebrated. Students who had once felt isolated and alone now had a community where they belonged. The administration had noticed the change as well. Bullying incidents had decreased by over 60% compared to the previous year. The school had implemented a peer mediation program based on what Ryan, Cole, and Mike had been doing informally. Students who were caught bullying weren't just punished. They were required to volunteer at the Community Hope Center, following the same path of education and transformation that had worked for the 3 boys. One afternoon, 6 months to the day after the original incident, the diner held a special gathering. Lily's mother had organized it as a way to thank everyone who had been part of their journey. The diner was packed with people whose lives had been touched by the events of that day. There was Lily, of course, sitting with her group of friends, all of them laughing and comfortable. There was Tommy, the boy who had been bullied, now confident and smiling. There was Sophia, Christine, Kevin, Marcus, Mrs. Helen, and dozens of others from the Community Hope Center.